Morning, everyone. The last party conference or major one before we go back to Parliament, the Conservatives. It's been quite a weird one, but it's all about the Conservative leadership contest, of course. And Kemi Badenoch is still trying to corner the ground as the craziest one. But, and I've said before that I think, in my view, Kemi Badenoch is as crazy as Truss, and she was up to her crazy antics yesterday, and as bad at politics as Sunak. And so we had her thing on the maternity pay, which was so crazy. Even the other leadership contenders went, "Oh, that's mad. Are you mental? No, we're not supporting that." Because even the Conservatives know that that is crazy. Why would you apply a financial penalty to having babies when we've already got like many Western countries, or actually many advanced economies around the world, a declining birth rate? But she seems to have doubled down on it. You say she's appealing to the Tory faithful or lap it up. I'm not sure. No, I don't think it will at all. If that was the case, it wouldn't have received such a backlash. No, she's got this wrong. She's wrong. She's thinking to herself, the Tory party is basically the party of like the billionaire, really, or the bad business, as I keep saying. It's the party of no state support for anything, but they're not supposed to say it out loud. But she's followed it up by saying, "Oh, we should scrap minimum wage." Now, here's the thing about the minimum wage. So when Labour introduced it, when they were in power last time, the Conservatives argued strongly against it, right? Strongly against it. Even Michael Heseltine, we'd consider him these days a very moderate Conservative. He debated John Prescott on the matter, right? But they introduced it. All of the things the Tories said would go wrong and businesses would go bust and the economy would be ruined didn't happen. The economy actually powered up. So when the Conservatives came back to power, you'll notice they didn't try to remove minimum wage at all. They changed the name, in fact, and then tried to take credit for it. Boris Johnson tries, we introduced it. We introduced the living wage. Because that's what they did. They changed the name to living wage and then said it's theirs. So actually, it became so successful that the Conservatives actually just tried to take ownership of it. There's no hint they would remove it. So her coming out now and saying this, you might think to yourself, "Oh, well, that's just the sort of thing Conservatives want to hear." It's really not. They had 5 prime ministers when they were in power last time. Not a single one of them wanted to remove it. So and then she's also talking about, paying for the NHS at the point of contact. Now, although she's not saying, "Oh yeah, we should definitely all pay for the NHS," the fact that she's even talking about it as a thing for the future, again, it's like the public would be mistrustful of that. And for someone who's trying to be a populist as well, it's such a stupid thing to say. Because you would go, like, we know Nigel Farage, for example, says he's in favour of a private healthcare scheme, but he would never go campaigning on a platform of, "Yeah, we should make you all pay for using the NHS." And, that's because it's simple populist politics. If you've got 2 people and they're vying for your vote, in this case, it'd be Labour and the Conservatives when you're talking about a general election. And Labour is saying, "Yeah, we're going to manage the NHS and you will never pay for access to services when you use it." And the Conservatives saying, "Yeah, you should totally pay for it." Who are you going to vote for? Who are most of the public going to vote for? Remember, we know they can try and argue all day like, "Oh yeah, but then you'd have more money for better services," stuff like that. And we'll means test it. Yeah, thin end of the wedge. No, the public will say, "No, we'll have the party that says they'll do it where we've already paid for it in our taxes." So it's like she's trying to create this list of policies which will lose you the election. If she is elected leader, if she actually, and she won't, because her party won't let her. If she tried to stand on any of these policies at the next general election, Labour would just put their feet up and go, "Oh, there's no need for us to campaign. We'll walk it," because it's absolutely insane. And you actually get to thinking, because although I keep saying Badenoch is really bad at politics, and I think she is stunningly bad at politics, sometimes you think, but is she that bad? Can you be that bad? Even Rishi Sunak probably wasn't that bad. So then you start to think, maybe she's actually a secret genius. Maybe, oh yeah, someone's just put in the comments there, yeah. They've tried to take credit for setting up the NHS as well. Yeah, the Conservatives who, as the NHS was being legislated for in the 1940s, they opposed it every step of the way. Whereas these days they try and say, actually, yeah, we introduced the NHS. Did you know that? Yeah, not many people know that. Yeah, not many people know that, especially people who read history books. But where was it? Yeah. So I'm actually starting to wonder if Kemi Badenoch is, because in theory, she could actually be quite cunning here. Because imagine it this way. So think about it this way. Let's assume that Kemi Badenoch is not an idiot, right? So she rose to prominence in 2022. She did make a little bit of a name for herself as a junior minister, equalities minister, where she clearly had no respect for equality of any kind. But she really came to the public view during the 2022 leadership contest when Boris Johnson announced he was stepping down, after Michael Gove promoted her heavily. And obviously Michael Gove was one of the best regarded Tory MPs. He was regarded, he's not an MP anymore, but he was regarded as basically the most competent Tory MP. So his backing was fairly powerful. So Kemi Badenoch had this powerful backing that catapulted her into the limelight. She then ended up in cabinet, first for Liz Truss, then for Rishi Sunak. So she's seen as a future leader. She wants to be a future leader. But then you think to yourself, who would want to lead the Conservative Party right now? Because let's look at the future. Even at the Tory Party conference, I'm reading, I'm not there. I wasn't even at the Labour conference. But I am reading lots of accounts of what's going on at the Tory Party conference. And there's a lot of talk of, in terms of the strategy for the next election, an expectation that Labour are going to massively mess up. And you think about it and you think, it doesn't matter how likely you think that is. I think that is very unlikely. But it's quite telling that that is part of their strategy, because that's not a strategy. Your strategy cannot be to hope that your opponents mess up. But that is the reality of it. The reality of the situation is it doesn't matter what the Conservatives do. They could get the most intelligent, strategic leader. They don't have one, but they could. And they still won't win the next election unless Labour mess up. So they're utterly reliant on Labour messing up. Now, in a situation like that, would you really want to be the Conservative Party leader for the next few years? I wouldn't. It's a rubbish job. Being leader of the opposition is a rubbish job because it's very long hours. You get just as much scrutiny as the Prime Minister. You have just as long hours as any senior minister. And you have no power to do anything. None at all. It's a thankless task. Who would want to do that? And then at the end of it, it's different if you, at the end of it, are going to become Prime Minister. But if at the end of it, you're going to lose and then have to resign, humiliated, and let someone else take over when you might have done a bit of rebuilding. So she might have, I'm just almost tongue in cheek, I'm thinking to myself, if I were in this position, if I were in the position of wanting to lead the Conservatives, but not yet, but I can't stand back. I can't say, oh no, the time's not right for me, because everyone will know what that means. That means, oh yeah, you want someone else to clear up the mess and then you waltz in when they're ready for power again. So you arguably what you do is you say, right, let's pretend that I want to be leader. So you join the leadership contest, blah, blah, blah. Then you announce a series of policies so crazy that no one could possibly take you seriously for them, lose the contest, and then hope that after the next election, maybe you take over then. Maybe you think realistically, you could maybe keep Labour to 2 terms in power. So that might be what, but I don't think she is. I think she is actually just crazy. hang on, some comments here. I've lost it now. Oh yeah, there we go. There is the behind the scenes advice, as Rich and Liz share one, a special one, obviously, in the rest, including policy exchange and so on. There are common advisors, sure, but again, so if you think back to when the Conservatives were last out of power for a bit, so Theresa May coined the term the nasty party to describe the Conservative Party. She was saying, we are seen as cruel. We're seen as cruel. In fact, actually, I saw someone describe it recently, that often the public see the Conservatives as cruel but efficient, and they see Labour as caring but inefficient. And so what happens is, at the point at which Labour come to power, just like happened again this year, but also happened in 97, it's when Labour managed to flip it so that they're seen as caring and efficient, and the Tories are still seen as uncaring but inefficient. So Theresa May was saying, look, we're seen as cruel, we need to stop being... And it wasn't just her. Other senior Tories felt the same way, including David Cameron, who was the leader. And he actually, obviously, developed a completely different view of the Conservative Party. He tried, even on social issues like the hug a hoodie and stuff like that, and environmental issues, he made the Conservatives look caring, right? Now, it was all lies. We saw a complete difference when they were in power, but he presented that image. Badenoch is she's not sensitive to that at all. She's not aware that this is what they have to do. Anyway, Ivan Ambrose, $4.99 super chat, thank you very much, says it's beyond shameful that Badenoch said not all cultures are equal in relation to immigration. She does not speak for us. No, I mean, Pat McFadden had a good response to that for Labour, because he was asked about that on Sunday during the media round. Because a question like that can be very loaded if you say, do you believe that all cultures are equal? So it's not the sort of thing you want to say yes to, because I think you could probably argue, maybe we don't like Nazi culture. Maybe there are some cultures we don't like. But McFadden had a good answer to it. And he just said, I think we'll leave the culture wars to the Tories, which is the best way to do that. But no, it is, but there is no shame. Badenoch absolutely has no shame. Because again, I don't know what her ultimate ambition is. Maybe she just wants to be Tory leader for a few years. Maybe she's happy enough with that. Maybe she is conceited enough to think she can win with these views. Maybe she believes that actually a lot of the population hold these views, in which case, as an engineer, she's not very good at maths, because I will keep reminding anyone who needs to know that the Conservatives at the moment, and you get this impression from the conference, from what I'm gathering, they're utterly focused on the votes they lost to Reform UK, completely obsessed with it. And it's it's a lot of votes, don't get me wrong. But first of all, they're not getting them back. But the other thing to note, let's look at it again. I'm going to remind myself. The Reform UK and Tory share of the vote, if you add it up, comes to, what's this? 28%. No, sorry, 38%. Baby sound. 38% of the votes they got between them. Now, even if they could absolutely get all of those Reform UK votes back to the Conservatives, which they can't. Because remember, although Reform UK took the vast majority of their votes from the Conservatives, they took some from people who hadn't voted in the past, because they didn't want to vote for any of the mainstream parties. They took some from Labour, some from the Lib Dems, some from the Green Party, some from the SNP. And all those votes were all scattered everywhere as well. The other thing Conservatives need to consider is, so when we say, okay, combine all those votes together, which isn't actually possible, but if you did, 38% of the vote, you can win a majority with 38% of the vote. It's been done in the past. Of course, you could do it. It's not, I mean, Labour won a massive majority with less than that, in fact. But you have to think about where those votes are as well. They're all over the place. Some of those votes are in areas the Conservatives cannot possibly win. So those votes are worthless. So what they actually ought to be adding up is, how many valuable votes did Reform UK take? Not that many. Because remember, The Conservatives only lost 4 seats to Reform UK. They lost, how many seats did they lose in total? They lost over 200 seats, it's about 240 seats or something. I can't remember because they lost quite a few seats to by-elections throughout the Parliament. But they lost maybe 230-ish, maybe just under 230 seats at the actual election. And they lost 4 of them to Reform UK. The rest of them they lost to like Labour or the Lib Dems. In one hilarious case to the SNP. And it's absolutely insane. The Conservatives didn't have a conference out of wake. Well, do you know what? If we're going to talk about the Tory Party conference in terms of what it is, do you know how? I'll tell you like a couple of images of it that just tell you how messed up the Tory Party conference is this year. So first of all, Rishi Sunak, and this is actually quite sensible, by the way, he gave his speech on the first day and is basically pissed off, right? He says, and it is actually a fair enough point, it's just to give space to the leadership contenders because he's no longer going to play a leading role in the party, which is fair enough. But it's also, you know, it is what it is. But Liz Truss gave a speech for an hour. I don't think it was on the main stage. I think it was in like one of the fringe ones, just like last year. But how on earth do you allow Liz Truss to give a speech at your party conference for an hour? And I'll tell you who did give a speech on the main stage, as far as I could tell. Penny Mordaunt. Now you think to yourself, why? Why? She's not a senior Tory MP. She's not an MP. She lost her seat. And it's not like, okay, that, you know, you might bring back someone like George Osborne to give a speech or something, at least someone within the party regarded as being successful. Like Penny Mordaunt doesn't, she, just like Liz Truss, she actually represents Tory failure. Like Penny Mordaunt, although she's not responsible for any major cock-ups, she didn't do anything. She was, in fact, she was Defence Secretary for such a short amount of time. I keep forgetting she was Defence Secretary. But apart from that, she was never a Secretary of State. So she didn't run a government department. Like, why is she there? Why is she giving a speech? It's because they can't get any. They obviously can't fill out their speaker's schedule, that they're having to get someone like Penny Mordaunt along. It was absolutely crazy. She's not an up and coming. I mean, if you're going to get someone to do a big speech at the conference and they're not like, they've not got this proven track record of success, at least have it be an up and coming, you know, someone who's the future of your party. Penny Mordaunt, if they're going to say she could be, you know, she lost her seat. She could win her seat at the next election. She could then become leader in the future. Who knows? You know, so maybe, but it's a bit tragic if you're going to look at someone like Penny Mordaunt as maybe the future of the party. Did Liz Truss mention cat-eating immigrants at all? She's getting more like Trump by the day. No, but I'll tell you what, there's a vicious rumor going around social media. It's a parody, by the way. Unfortunately, I think I should have pointed out, and I didn't. It's the sort, with Liz Truss, it's such an obvious parody. But then you think with Liz Truss, maybe it's not. So there's this thing going around on Twitter. It's not true, by the way, that Liz Truss has blamed the underground transgender mafia for her downfall. And I sort of shared it because I thought it was funny. And then I did think later on, I probably should have made a comment that she didn't really say it. Because it's one of those things you'd think, well, no one would actually say that. It's obvious parody. But these days, parody is not that obvious, is it? Especially with someone like Liz Truss. Because, yes, some of the things she comes out with, it's almost like you would almost believe anything. Anyway, Brad W, £5 super chat, thank you. It says, send Truss to pensioners' houses this winter to waffle on about economic fantasies. Not only would they need heating, they might need aircon. Yeah, I think that's going to be a sore point this winter, actually. But, I mean, I don't know why the Conservatives are allowing her to, you know, well, hold on. One angry pagan there saying it's because she once wielded that bearing sword. I keep saying I've got a better sword than she had. And it's my sword. I didn't have to borrow it. I've got one. It's mine. But anyway, I don't understand why the Conservatives, because are sticking with Liz Truss. Because I keep saying, and I actually think the only reason they're not in a much tighter position is Labour are missing a trick here. They're absolutely missing a trick. And I've said it for a long, long time. Before the election, Labour should be saying to the public, the Tories, have not abandoned Trussonomics, because the public have. The public have completely rejected Liz Truss's economic policies. Doesn't matter how much she bangs on it. Oh, it's unfair. You said I crashed the economy. I didn't crash the economy. No, she didn't crash the economy. She crashed the pound and she destroyed people's pension funds, right? But, the public have nonetheless, whether they fully understand it or not, completely rejected Liz Truss's economic ideas. So Labour should be hammering every day that the Tories want to bring her policies back. They want her policies. That is what, and they can keep pointing to the fact that's why they keep inviting her to talk about them at their conference, because they want them. And the thing is, the Conservatives will not disagree, because you'd think to yourself, if Labour say that, all the Conservatives have to say is, no, we completely reject that, right? They won't. They actually won't do that, because they know that actually a lot of them do agree with her economic ideas. A lot of party members do. A lot of MPs do. So it's not even one they can deny. Like last Parliament, the Conservatives kept going on about, it's like Jeremy Corbyn. He was in Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet, so you're basically getting Jeremy Corbyn. And like all Labour had to do was say, no, we've moved on. We've moved on from that. That's all they had to do. And it was obvious. The Conservatives won't do that. In theory, that's all they have to do. The next Tory leader just has to say, no, we completely reject the failures of Liz Truss. But I saw there was an interview. Kevin Hollyrake, it may have been. I can't remember, some other Tory MP. And, I think it was Victoria Derbyshire quizzing him about Truss's economic legacy. And it was like, he didn't want to say, oh, yeah, it was totally fine and it was all the, Marxist guilt investors that caused the problems. But at the same time, nor could he reject the economic ideas either. And that's the thing, they'll be stuck in there. Which tube line can we find for the underground trans mafia? Who knows? But it would, see, that's the thing. I did think, as soon as I retweeted it, I did think maybe I should have just quote tweeted it and said, this isn't real, by the way, it's just funny. Because people might believe it. It is the sort of crazy thing she might say. She didn't. She didn't, just to be clear. But there we go. Labour seemed to have suddenly caught a massive dose of political naivety. Well, there was a sense in which I think some of it was always there. I think what the problem is, Starmer himself is not a natural politician. That's fine as long as you've got really good advisors. Now, he will have some good advisors, but I think just the way Number 10 operates is he doesn't have enough people getting out those. He's too slow to get these messages out there. He's done it so many times before where something's happening and he should have immediately come out with a response, and he hasn't. He has come out with a response, but it's like he has to, I've got to talk to this person, we'll get to consensus. And it's like, no, there are some things you need to get that message out immediately. And they don't have the people to do that, or they don't have enough people to do that. But anyway, Ivan Ambrose there, $4.99. The crazies also keep on saying, bring back Boris, just the thought sends shivers down my spine. Well, that's what's hilarious. I'm doing a video on that. That's actually quite hilarious. Because what it means is, because he's planning to coming back. I've not read his, his book's not even out and I'm not going to read it. But there are obviously journalists who've been given advance copies of his book and have read it. And there was someone in The Independent saying it's absolutely full of hints that he's coming back, right? So here's how it works for Boris Johnson. Here's in his head, right? Here's what's going to happen. The next Tory leader is going to fail, which is probably, as long as Labour start, because think about it this way, whoever takes over from the Conservatives, their first, arguably their easiest time will be the first year or two, because Labour will be doing all the stuff that looks unpopular, but the benefits which will be popular will take, for most people, some benefits will be immediate, some benefits are immediate, but some benefits will take a couple of years before most people see them, like reducing NHS waiting times, things like that. So, the Conservative leader technically has a couple of years where they can really put the screw on Labour. Only they'll have to spend those 2 years trying to get their own party into line. So you can imagine a situation where they do this. They're getting their party into line. So after about 2 years, that's when they've got their party, assuming they know what they're doing, which is a big assumption. They've got their party in a fit state. They've remodeled it, and just like Starmer had to do with Labour, and they're ready to go. And then, bosh, all the benefits start coming through. Labour start talking, right, we'll fix this. The Tories said you couldn't fix that without, like, they said you couldn't get these waiting lists down without paying for the NHS. We've done it. You don't have to pay for NHS treatment, but now you can get it. And things like that. Housing should hopefully start to be looking a lot better. The energy situation should start to look better. They'll start to be able to point at data that shows things. I'm hoping we'll actually have got some a better relationship with the EU as well at this point. So the benefits will start to come through. And that's the point at which Labour's approval rating, I'm not saying should start to go up. I'm bloody well hoping they get their messaging right and it goes up before then. But that is where it should really take off. So Boris Johnson's plan is spend a few years, it seems, making a load of money, then try and get a safe by-election in time to be in place when whoever replaces Sunak gets binned by the party, because there's not a lot of people seem to think they'll even make it to the election. So the thing is, whoever wins the Tory leadership contest, they're going to have to watch their backs, because Boris Johnson is still seen, I don't know by how many MPs, but he's still seen by a lot of the party as having this almost magical ability to win elections. And they are deluded. They're utterly deluded, his supporters. When they say he should never have stepped down, it's like he was going to be suspended from Parliament. He was going to lose his seat because he was going to get kicked out of Parliament. He was going to be suspended. The recall petition would have succeeded. So that would it. You would have a prime minister who was not a member of Parliament, which constitutionally you can sort of have for a bit, but it would be disastrous for the Tories, and he wouldn't win his seat. He'd have lost the by-election. So they'd have been in a right mess. They seem to forget about that. And another thing they're forgetting about, if you think 2 or 3 years ahead, what's going to have happened is Boris Johnson, you might think to yourself, well, maybe Boris Johnson recovers his public image, passage of time and so on. And crazier Tory leaders, and maybe people think, oh, well, Boris wasn't that bad after all compared to like Truss, Sunak, and maybe Badenoch or Jenrick, whoever wins. And then you think, well, you might be forgetting the COVID inquiry. That's ongoing. The procurement module is probably going to be the one that's going to be most damaging to Johnson personally. That hasn't happened yet. And then Labour, remember, are pursuing fraud, COVID fraud that happened on Boris Johnson's watch. So there's the potential for Boris Johnson's name to suffer a further battering actually in the next few years. They're so deluded. And yet that is his plan. So whoever becomes the next Tory leader may well find themselves seen as an interim leader while they wait for Boris Johnson to come back. At which point they'll struggle to build up any sort of authority within the party. So they're completely screwed. They're utterly screwed. Whoever wins the next leadership contest is buggered. And so, as I say, although Kemi Badenoch strikes me as being someone who's completely naive, I wouldn't be surprised if she's looking at the situation and thinking, yeah, it's a poison chalice. Someone has to be Tory leader after an election loss like this, but you wouldn't want it to be you. You're not going to bounce back to power. In order to bounce back to power, not only would you have to, well, first of all, Badenoch's not even trying, is she? She's just tacking right. That's not going to win voters back. And you're dependent on Labour messing up. And you're dependent on Boris Johnson not coming back when it sounds like he wants to come back. So there we go. If Johnson gets back into Parliament, will he still owe us a 2-week suspension? 2 weeks? It was longer than that. No, because he wasn't actually given the suspension because he'd already left. So the suspension, it was actually going to be a massive suspension. It was about 3 months or something, I think. But it was never actually applied because the committee, I think they should have applied it, but they didn't. Now, in theory, I don't know. In theory, like if you get a suspension, but then you resign, but then you win another by-election, you then do have the suspension applied, but it may only apply for that parliament. So in a following parliament, he may get away with it. But it never was applied in the first place, so he'll basically get away with it scot-free. The question is there a seat safe enough for him to win it? Who stands down for it as well? Who stands down in a really safe Tory seat so Boris Johnson can come back? And the thing is, if you're the leader, let's say you're Kemi Badenoch and you are Tory leader, would you allow it? Would you allow Boris Johnson to stand? Because you know there's only one reason Boris Johnson wants to stand, and that is to trigger your downfall. Like, imagine it this way. You are the Tory leader. It's quite a tricky situation, because on the one hand, you'll think you can't be seen to be blocking Boris Johnson. But on the other hand, you know that if he comes back to Parliament, it means his supporters are getting ready to trigger a no confidence vote in you. In which case you're signing your own death warrant. That could be quite entertaining if you're not inside the Conservative Party. But anyway, Boris can win Clacton. Oh yeah, let him. Actually, no, because we'd have to get Nigel Farage to stand down. Maybe at the next election they could make him the candidate for Clacton. That would be hilarious. Boris Johnson against Nigel Farage. Yeah, I would buy popcorn for that, and I don't even like popcorn. But there we go. Anyway, we'll have to leave it there. We'll run out of time. Thanks very much for coming on, everyone. Hopefully things will get a bit more entertaining, at least when the Conservatives select their leader. But we've got to wait another month for that. But have a great rest of the day. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel, of course. And until next time, I'll see you later.